We'll do now the 24th Maimer in Sefer HaMaimorim Melukit. This is the Maimer of Ashri, Tibchar, Vatקרב. The Rebbe said this Maimer on Thursday night, early Yom Vov Erev Shabbos Kodesh, of the Parshas Chayesora, which was the 26th of Mrcheshvan in tsh'tz Zayin. It says over here in the bottom in the note that this was published in the Kuntres called the 18th of Nisan Tinosei in Tavshin Aleph. They printed it for the Yom HaBoyer, for that clear day of the Chai Nisan of the 18th of Nisan. In honor of Chai Nisan, they printed this Maimer, which was the birthday of Kedushas Rav Agon, Rav Chosidam Kubel, Moreinu Reb Levi Yishchok Zal Schneerson, the father, Yibod L'chaim Tovim of the Rebbe Shlita. He was born in the year Tofreish Lamed Ches. Reb Levi Schneerson, the Rebbe's father, was born in Tofreish Lamed Ches. So that's one thing that happened on Chai Nisan in honor of that. The second thing is, Otchila Shnasat Tzadik, this was also the 90th year of Knisas Kvet Yedushas Ad Murashlita Librisir Shel Avram Avinu Olav HaSholem. When the Rebbe entered into the bris, the Rebbe's bris took place on the 18th day of Nisan. The Rebbe was born on Yud Aleph Nisan, so on the 18th day of Nisan was the bris of the Rebbe. And in honor of L'Eirich Yom V'Shanim Tevis, and in honor of that, they published this booklet, this Kuntres Chai Nisan, because this Maimer, as we'll see, this was dated Friday, Erev Shabbos Kodesh, Erev Chag HaPesach, and Shnas Tinosei. And this Maimer, the Rebbe said in his holy room, in the Vachnacht, that was the night before the bris, by the grandson of Rav Agon, Rav Chosid, Moreinu, with the titles here, Moreinu Ephraim Eliezer Zal HaKoyin Yolus. So basically, the Maimer the Rebbe gave before a bris, this was on the Vachnacht, from the grandson of Rabbi Yolus, and they published this because this posik that the Rebbe starts the Maimer and explains it is the posik that we say before the bris. And the Rebbe will explain the pasuk of Ashri, Tibchar, Vatקרב, Yishkon Chatzerecha Nizbo B'tei B'secha Kodei Sheichalecha, how this represents the four levels of Bria, Yitzira, Atzilus, Bria, Yitzira, Asiya. And by a bris, we come to the higher level of higher than Hishtalshalus. So first we need the first four levels of Hishtalshalus to be complete. And that's why before the bris, we say this pasuk, because at the bris, after the pasuk, we will reach even in a higher level, to the level of higher than Hishtalshalus. And the Rebbe will explain details in the pasuk. So let's look at inside in the Maimer. B'sayayte d'shmaya, early Yom Vov Erev Shabbos Kodesh, Parshas Chayesora, Chav Vov Mrcheshvan, tsh'tz Zayin. That's when the Rebbe gave the Maimer, and as we said before in the note, that this was done in the room of the Rebbe, that the Rebbe said the Maimer in front of Rabbi Yolus on the Vachnacht of his grandson. Ashrei, Tibchar, Vatקרב, fortunate is the one that you choose and that you bring close. And he says, Yishkon Chatzerecha, he will dwell in your courtyard. Nizba B'tuv B'secha, he will be satisfied, saturated with the good of your home. And Kedei Sheichalecha, and with the sanctity of your room, with your heichal. So basically, as the Rebbe will explain, there is four levels. Two levels in Chatzerecha, Yishkon Chatzerecha, and then we have Beisecha and Heichalecha. And these Chatzerecha, as the Rebbe will explain represent Asiya and Yitzira. They're chotzer, they're outside. That's the place for the animals in the chotzer. And then we have two levels within the Beisecha and Heichalacha, Beisecha being Bria and Heichalacha being Atzilus, as we will see. Hine posig ze emrim lifnei bris mila. This verse we say before a bris mila. It is of besidur seder hamila, as we find in the siddur of the Alter Rebbe in the order of mila that we start with this pasuk before the bris. Ma'moker lo zehu. What is the source for saying this? Mashakosu bezoyar, this that is written in the Zoyar, Chasidi Kademoyi, the earlier righteous chulu, Kad Mekarivon Benayu Likarbana, when they bring these sons as an offering, meaning they're doing a bris milah, as it's considered to be as an offering to Hashem. Do paschi be'amri, the following, they open up and they say, says the Zoyar, Ashrei Tibchar ותקרב ישכון חצרך וכו'. So while the Zoyar uses the Lashon Chasidi Kademoyi, so that means that it seems that this is something which only the earlier Hasidim would do. But since the Alter Rebbe put it in his siddur for everybody, that means that everybody has this introduction as we do it, because the siddur is written for everybody. It's not just for the Chasidi Kadmoi. V'gam shebezoyar shom Chasidi Kadmoi chulu. Even though over there it says Chasidi Kadmoi, Kosov ze'admor hazoken b'sibu durei. The Alter Rebbe writes this to say this. He writes it in the siddur, shehu davar hashomer l'chol nefesh, which is an item which is equal for everyone. So, why do we say this pasuk before the bris milah? What's the connection? Is the pasuk zel bris milahu, to explain the connection between this pasuk and circumcision, the pasuk of Tehillim. Why do we say this pasuk of Tehillim before the bris milah? The pasuk zeh nimnin daled inyonim, because we count 4 matters in this pasuk. Chatzerecho loshon rabim, which is shtei bechinas chatzer. Chatzerecho is a plural, which is 2 levels in chatzer, and then we also have beisecha ve'echalach, another 2 levels. Beseder ha'inyonim b'hapasik hu milmata l'maylo. The order of these matter in this verse are from below to above. We start with the chatzer, and then we work our way up to beisecha and heichalacha. K'di'iso bezoyar sham, as we find in the Zoyar there, bekadmiso chatzerecha. First, it is chatzerecha, lebasar, then we go to beisecha, ulebasar heichalacha, and then you come to heichalacha. Afterwards is heichalacha. Do pnimo min do, vedo le'elo min do. One is more inner than the other, sort of the bias is more inner than the chotzer, and also it is higher min do, and so on, and the heichel is higher and more inner than the bais. Yesh loymar, and we could say shedaled inyonim elu, that these 4 aspects hem keneged daled elumeis abiyah, they correspond to the 4 worlds of Atzilus, Bri, Yitzira, Asiya. Kidelekamon Sivava, as later on the Rebbe will say in Sivav. And this is why we say this pasuk before the bris. Ki al yidei hamila hu hamshocha shalamaylo mihishtalshnus. Through circumcision, we bring down from higher than ishtalshnus. Ubichdei sheti hamshocha zu, tzarich liyas tchila hashleimus the hishtalshlus. So in order for this hamshoch of l'mayla mehashtalshlus to take place, first we need to have the completeness of the hishtalshlus. Daled olam, as the four worlds, kid l'kamon siv zayin, as we will see later on in siv zayin. So first, the Rebbe is going to explain what is a chotzer and what is a bayis. That a chotzer is a place in which animals go, and in a house is people. So in animals itself, we have a chotzer which just has walls, and then we have a chotzer which also has a roof on it, and these are also two levels. The chotzer protects the walls, protects the animals that are in the chotzer, that the animals shouldn't run away. They stay there. But birds would not stay because they fly higher than the chotzer, so they need a roof on top of that. And the Rebbe will explain that the idea is that the chotzer is a more obvious place for the behemoth, which represents a more obvious inclination of like a behemoth to go out, and what it takes is you have to fence it in, not to allow the behemoth to go out. But the bird represents a more refined level, a higher level, which cannot just be held in by the walls. We need also a roof, a recognition of something higher. Let's see how the Rebbe will explain all this. Inyan base, Inyan who the idea is the chiluk bein chotzer u bayis kipshutum, who what's the difference between a chotzer and a house? Literally, the simple text is the bayis who diras odom. The house is a place where a person lives. Ubechotzer nimtsoyim habehemes v'ha'ifes. In the courtyard, you find over there is a place for the animals and the birds. Kedisa b'Mishnah, like the Mishnah says that hoya ma'amid behema b'chotzer u'migdal tarnegolim, that he placed a behema in the courtyard and the tower for these chickens so that they were in the chotzer. So generally, a chotzer is for behemoths and targum negolim, but more specifically, in the chotzer, within the chotzer is shnei sugim. You have two categories. You have a chotzer mikura. You have a chotzer which has a roof over it, and you have a chotzer she'eina mikura, and a chotzer which is not covered with a roof. The cover with a roof is necessary to protect also the birds, because otherwise they'd fly away. And the regular chotzer is enough for the animals. The achiluk bein chotzer mikura v'chotzer she'eina mikura hu gam b'halacha. The Rebbe says there's not just a practical difference, but there is a halachic difference, that the chotzer she'eina mikura accomplishes in halacha. It makes it a reshus hayochid even midrabanan. We have the halacha that karfaf versus yoser misosayim. If you have this area that is closed in, but it's lehukaf ledira, it's not meant for a dira, it's surrounded. But even though it's walls, so minatoira, it's like a reshus hayochid. But midrabanan, they say it looks like a carmelis, so it has a din of a carmelis. But once the chotzer has a roof, so then even midrabanan, it will be considered a reshus hayochid. So this is what the Rebbe says here. Chiluk bein chotzer mekura v'chotzer she'eina mekura. The difference between a chotzer which has a roof and a chotzer doesn't have a roof, v'gam b'halacha, is also an halacha. The chotzer she'einei mekura, kishehu yoser misasayim. When we're talking about a chotzer which is not with a roof, when it's high, more larger than sosayim, because if it's smaller than that, then even it's not a karfaf. In order to be a karmelis with rabbanon, it has to be yoser misosayim. But chotzer, if it's not mekura, when it's more of a sosayim, midiraisa take, it's a reshus hayochid, as the Rebbe will explain. When a Torah, from the perspective of the Torah, that would be a reshus hayochid. Abel medivrei sofrim who karmelis, but medivrei sofrim becomes a karmelis. Lefi shedoimel reshus harabim, because it appears like a reshus harabim. It's a large area. It's loy hukaf ledira. It's not meant for living. It's not surrounded for a living space. It is a courtyard. And it's more than sosayim. So Medrabon is a karmelis because lefisha doima l'reshus harabim. But the chotzer mekura. But if you should put a roof on that chotzer, which is more than sosayim, reshus hayochid gam medivrei sofrim, then that would be also reshus yochid Medrabon. V'achiluk beineim bepashtus. So this tells you that there's also a difference. There's a chotzer mekura and a chotzer she'eina mekura. Chotzer she'eina mekura is midrabanon, at least it's considered to be a karmelis, and a chotzer mekura is considered shus hayochid. Why is there a difference between mekura and not mekura? V'achiluk beinehem bepashtus, and the difference simply is the shmiras habehemes gam b'chotzer she'eina mekura. Animals can be watched even in a courtyard which is not have a roof over it. All that we need is the chotzer to be surrounded by walls in order to watch the animals. And therefore that chotzer is not a fully, doesn't protect everything, only protects animals. But and if we want to protect the birds that can fly on top of the walls, who is in the chotzer mekura. The Rebbe will explain later on, towards the end of the Maimer, the Rebbe will explain this difference also, that on the simple level, a chotzer that is trying to protect the animal within the person, in the obvious level, over there it's enough of a protection so that you don't stray from your machshava, dibur, and ma'isa, the most important things that are necessary. But when it comes to the level of oif, that's a more refined, that has to do with the level of being able to fly. It's a level of yeshus. It's not just you're doing the mitzvahs, but you could mistakenly start thinking of yourself as an entity. So over there you need a shmira through the chotzer mekura, which will remind you that there's HaKadosh Baruch Hu there, and there's no mitzias besides Hashem, as we'll say later on. So yesh levayir al pi ma'adi iso b'gemara. So we can explain based on what we find in the Gemara. And the Rebbe will bring down that the behema is a more obvious nefesh habahamis, represents a thicker and a more lower level of nefesh habahamis, and the bird represents a refined level of nefesh habahamis. And that's why it also fits with the needs of shechita. By a behema, you need 2 simonim, and by a bird, we only need 1 simon, because to shecht a bird is easier. It's not such klipadik, and therefore 1 simon is enough to shecht it. But by a shenkim, by a behema, which is a thicker level of klipa. Yesh levayir we can explain this based on what we find in the Gemara, that behemo shenivras min hayabosha, that an animal that is created from the yabosha, the pasuk says that the Eibishter, by the animals, they came from the ground. And so over there, because it came, as opposed, the bird comes from a mixture of water and ground. It's a mixture, so it also has water in it. But the behema is straight from offer, from the ground, from the abosha. That's why it needs 2 simonim to be machshir, it says the Gemara. And oif shenivra min harekak, but the bird who was created from the rekak, a mixture of water and earth, so that represents that it's not as thick as all offer. That's why to make the bird kosher, we only need to cut 1 siman, one of the 2 simanim. So it's explained elsewhere that the behema shenivras min ha'ofar, which is yabosha, what that means that it's created from the offer yabosha, shalochein yesh lo chayis bori v'chazak, and that's why it has a healthy and a strong energy. The reimes al nefesh abahamis kimoy shehi b'teikev hagasus. That hints to the animal soul as it is in force of its grossness, that it is it's a thick, the nefesh habahamis, the full nefesh habahamis as it is in force. So in order to get work and prepare it and make it kosher, you need to cut both simonim. That's why it becomes kosher through simonim. But the bird that comes from the rakak, from the mud, which is mayim ve'ofar, which is water and ofar, that hints on the animal soul as it is on the refined level. That's why 1 siman is sufficient to make it kosher. So we're talking about right now, generally, nefesh habahamis, there is the toikev of the nefesh habahamis, and there is a refined level of the nefesh habahamis. But specifically, within the nefesh habahamis, there's also 2 levels. There is the animal soul, which is the emotional, basically, soul of nefesh habahamis. But then you also have the nefesh hasichlis, the intellectual part of the nefesh habahamis, which is represented by the bird. The emotional animal soul is hinted by the behema, and the intellectual is level, the nefesh hasichlis is represented by the bird. The protis yoser, and more specifically, behema nefesh habahamis atzma. That's the animal soul itself. Shehi mimadreges tachtoinas de noiga. That is from the lower steps, levels of noiga, which is gasus shelo. That's the thickness of the nefesh habahamis. Fu nefesh hasichlis, but the bird is nefesh hasichlis. Shehi imi madreges elyoina de noiga. That's from the upper steps, levels of noiga, which is dakus shelo. It's the refined part of the nefesh habahamis. Shalochein, that's why the nefesh hasichlis, he memutza, she serves as a intermediary bein nefesh habahamis v'nefesh hasichlis, between the animal soul and the godly soul, because it is the upper level, the refined level within the nefesh habahamis. Bezehu Sheha'oif pareach ba'avir mizman lizman. Because of this refinement, the bird flies from time to time. It flies. Why does it fly in the air? And the Rebbe said there's two explanations. So there are two ways to explain why the nefesh hasichlis, the bird, flies from time to time. It is the intellectual soul itself has in it the capacity that it flies. Kiteva haseichel, because the nature of seichel, kam haseichel the nefesh hasichlis, even the seichel of the intellectual soul, which is what we're dealing over here, hagam shu seichel tiva seichel the nega, although it is a natural seichel, it's a seichel of nega. Mekomakom, nevertheless, kiven shu seichel, since it is still seichel, tiva yuli is nimshach lamasha lamayla mimenu. It's naturally going to be drawn to what's higher than it. So just because it is seichel, it'll go up higher. But there's another idea, shal yidei ha'islapshus, the nefesh alikis, benefesh hasichlis, through the nefesh alikis dressing up in the intellectual soul. So this happens not from this nefesh hasichlis atzma. This is through the dressing up, as we said, it serves as an intermediary between the nefesh hasichlis, between the nefesh alikis and the nefesh habahamis. So through the dressing up of the nefesh alikis benefesh hasichlis, she has the ability to understand, to grasp godly matters, which is higher than the world. The nefesh alikis gives the nefesh hasichlis the power to fly, to understand something which is higher than the world. Elo shegam oz hirak maskima la soga the nefesh alikis. But even if it's the impact of the nefesh alikis, it's not that the nefesh habahamis itself. It only that she agrees to the grasping of the nefesh alikis. She remains in her essence as an intellectual seichel. So now the Rebbe is going to explain why the nefesh alikis, the nefesh habahamis itself, the thick nefesh of the nefesh habahamis, the behemo. Over there, you have a regular chotzer. And for the oif, which represents the nefesh hasichlis, over there we need the mekura, we need the roof. That the guarding of the animals is also in a courtyard which is not have a roof. But the guarding of the birds is specifically in a yard where it has a roof. It would almost seem that since oifes, birds, are more refined, why do they need to be watched more than the behemoth itself? And the answer is kidakus the noiga ein nikar kol kach. That's actually the reason, because that refinement of noiga is not so visible. We can tell that it's actually noiga, and that's why it's not something that one can on his own figure out. Davke, because dakas the noiga is a nikar kolkach, because it's not, you can't tell. You can't tell the klippa. So that's why that's why you need additional guarding for it. If it's a behemoth, which it's obvious that it's klippa, So over there, just making a wall and fencing in the animal, that is sufficient. But when we talk about the bird, which is a more refined level of klippa, since you can't tell because of its refinement that it's so much klippa, so you need to be more careful, as the Rebbe will explain just in a bit how it represents itself. That when we're talking about on this simple level of machshava, dibura, maisa, thought, speech, and action, so over there you got to just fence yourself in. But when we talk about the refined klippa, in which the person becomes a metzias, an entity, because he thinks of himself, of his level, as somebody, you can't tell that this is klippa. So over there you need the roof. The roof reminds you that there's something above you. Let's look inside. And to add, the kemoisha begashmius, just as physically. Hatam al zeh sha'oifis einon nishmorim b'chotzer she'einem mikuruhu. What is the reason birds are not guarded in a yard which does not have a roof? The reason is because they fly on top of the walls. This is similar to this, is also in the spiritual level. Why does the intellectual soul require additional guarding? Because it has the characteristic of flying in the ear. What does that mean? Behind you. Because we said before that the nefesh hasichlis goes higher. The kiv on shaseichel, the nefesh hasichlis, nimshach mashal mimenu. Since the intellect of the intellectual soul is drawn to what is higher than it, so it wants to go higher. And even more than on its own nature of the nefesh hasichlis. Shuhu masig al yidei hislapshus nefesh alikiz benefesh hasichlis, that the nefesh hasichlis grasps by the godly soul dressing up in the nefesh hasichlis in yonei elikus shalamayla me'olam, godly matters which are higher in the world. Lochein, therefore, so it looks like it's going up higher, so it looks like it's can't tell that it's klippas. So in order to find the bad which is in the seichel of the nefesh hasichlis, udavke al yidei ha'izboinenus, it's dafke through reflection shalakus hu mufla miseichel enoshi, that elakus godliness is beyond, is mufra, is distinct from the human intellect. Hainu, which means to say, shagam ho'inyonim delakus hamusogim b'seichel anushi, even those matters of godliness that one can grasp with the human intellect. So even that ein haseichel masig oisom k'moshehem la'amitosom, the intellect cannot grasp them as they are in truth. Kikivon shehem elikus, since their godliness, harehem blikvul, they have no limit. Ukemosha seichel toifes oisom, and as the seichel grasps them, it must be limiting them. A seichel, the human seichel, cannot really fully understand the godliness, and it limits it, therefore. The nefesh hasichlis, the oif, through the nefesh hasichlis, which is represented by the bird, margisha, feels, senses the higher level, senses the avlos alakus shel ma'alam ha'seichel. It senses godliness that is higher than seichel, which is mekura begag. It has a wall, a roof over it. Ayideizen is barer dakusara shabo. That's a way it sorts out also the refined level of Ra that is in it. That means nishmeres, that it's guarded. It is guarded because you have the roof above, which gives you the haflas, haseichel in it.